Hello, and welcome to another vlog. This week's theme is occupational therapy. As always, I will be releasing a video on Thursday in which I explore this week's topic in more detail, so subscribe if you want to see that. Today there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. First, I'd like to talk a bit about my personal experience with occupational therapy, and then I'd like to talk a bit about the rehabilitation process. So let's get started. So I've been working with occupational therapists for most of my life. Starting when I was a child, my occupational therapist helped to arrange my nighttime orthotics, which I often referred to as my moon boots. You'll remember I talked a bit about those in a couple of the other vlogs that I've done. My OT also helped me to get my first wheelchair when I was 9, which I used part-time, and then my first power chair when I was 11, which I used full-time. Since then, I've went through a total of 4 wheelchairs, 2 lifts, a hospital bed, several shower chairs, and something called a shower buddy, which is essentially a special contraption to help get me in and out of the shower. Um, so that's a lot of medical equipment that I've relied on over the years, and each of those devices I have acquired with the help of an occupational therapist. So as you can see, occupational therapists have helped me quite a bit, but not just in terms of my healthcare, but also they've done a lot for me in terms of my education. Um, when I was a student, my occupational therapist and I often explored different types of assistive technology. Now, I myself didn't really use a lot of assistive technology while I was in school, but it was very valuable to test out some different options and to know what was available just in case I did require something. Um, Another thing that the occupational therapist did while I was in school is they worked with the school board to implement an evacuation plan because prior to that point there was no evacuation plan in place to evacuate someone in a wheelchair during an emergency situation. So my occupational therapists worked with the fire department, the school board, my parents, and my teachers, and myself to implement an evacuation plan that would not only work for me, but also any future students in wheelchairs when it came time to evacuate from the school or off the bus. Um, like I said, prior to that, there was no evacuation plan in place. So if there was a fire at the school or if there was a bus accident, uh, there was no planned way to get me out of the school or off the bus. So the occupational therapist worked with people from a number of different organizations and we implemented something that worked. Essentially, the evacuation plan involved 2 people carrying me down the stairs or off the bus in a fire blanket because obviously during an emergency situation, using the elevator or the lift is not the safest or smartest idea. Um, and I continue to see my occupational therapists on a regular basis. Every time I need to get a new medical device, I usually go through my occupational therapist and they'll follow up with me regularly. And I continue to see them regularly and will do so for many years to come. So as you can see, occupational therapy is something that I've relied on heavily over the years. And last week I talked about physiotherapy. Well, my physiotherapist and my occupational therapist have always worked closely together because although physiotherapy and occupational therapy are 2 different types of rehabilitation, um, they both have the same end goal, which is helping to maintain someone's functionality and independence. They go about reaching that goal in different ways, but they do have the same end goal. And so, for that reason, physiotherapists and occupational therapists will often work closely together, and that was certainly the case with me. So, that's just a brief overview of all the ways that I've benefited from occupational therapy. Um, this is just my personal experience. It doesn't begin to cover other people's experiences with occupational therapy, because occupational therapy benefits from uh, changes rather from person to person, depending on what their diagnosis is and what their specific needs are and what setting it's being provided in, because occupational therapy isn't just something that people benefit from in a healthcare setting. It can also be used in an academic, employment, or recreational setting. Um, and for that reason, you'll often see occupational therapists quite active in the community. And so that brings me to the next thing that I want to talk about today, which is the rehabilitation process. Like I said, occupational therapy is a form of rehabilitation. So I just want to talk a little bit about how it works. Now, this process isn't based on any official documentation. This is just my attempt at trying to illustrate to you how occupational therapy works. So, occupational therapy, I think, can be divided into four main steps. There's assessment, planning, implementation, and follow-up. So I'll go over each of those a little bit. So the first step to rehabilitation is assessment. So this just means working with the patient to determine what their healthcare needs are and what their treatment goals are. And like I said, this is going to vary from patient to patient depending on what their diagnosis is and what setting they're trying to be rehabilitated in. So no two people are going to have the same needs or goals. The second step is planning. So planning basically means developing a plan that will help that patient meet their healthcare needs and their treatment goals. And again, this is going to vary based on a number of factors. Um, right? Someone might need, a plan to help them live independently, whereas other people might require a plan to help them get an education or go to work or participate in the community, right? It really depends on what people's needs are. The third step is implementation. So implementation basically means putting that plan into place. So, it's one thing to have a plan on paper, but that doesn't really do you any good until you actually execute that plan. So that's what the third step, implementation, is all about, is executing that plan to actually help that patient meet their healthcare needs and treatment goals. And then the final step, step 4, is follow-up. So this step is when the occupational therapist or other medical professional basically follows up with the patient at a later date um, to see how well the plan's working and address any issues that may arise. So if there's a part of the plan that isn't functioning as well as it should, the occupational therapist and the patient will work together to iron out that issue and to make changes to the plan if necessary, right? And so to put it in a more practical sense, this is the same process that I would have went through with an occupational therapist every time I get a wheelchair. So first they'll assess what I need in a wheelchair. Then they'll go through the process of ordering that wheelchair. When the wheelchair comes, they'll work with me and the salesperson to make sure that the wheelchair um, is suiting my needs, and then they'll follow up regularly to just see if I need any repairs or maintenance to my wheelchair and to make sure that everything's working. And if it's not, then we'll find a solution to that. So like I said, this is really a very simplified explanation of how occupational therapy works. There's a lot of factors at play here, but I hope this is just going to give you a very basic overview of how it works. Anyway, that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed today's vlog. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button and also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Like I said, I will be releasing a video on Thursday, so I hope to see you then. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you on Thursday.